Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to dive deep into something I think a lot of us struggle with, boundaries,
Yeah, boundaries can be tough.
for sure. And to help us, we're going to be looking at a chapter from Lysa TerKeurst's book, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes.
Oh, I like her.
Me too. This chapter really gets into those fears that can get in the way of us, setting those boundaries.
Like, what are we so afraid of?
Exactly, that's the title. What am I so afraid of? And then she just lays out this whole list. It's kind of scary how accurate it is.
Oh, I bet.
Like right off the bat, she talks about the fear of not being validated
Mm,
or in control or liked.
yeah, those are big ones.
Totally. And it's like she's tapping into these really basic human needs, you
Oh,
know?
absolutely. We all want to feel accepted and connected.
Right. But it's like those needs can turn into traps if we let them like totally dictate our boundaries.
100%.
And the list just keeps going. The fear of not being seen as perfect or good or even like in good standing with people.
Hmm. What's interesting there is how many of these fears are all about what other people think.
Yeah, that's so true. It's
Yeah.
like we're looking to other people to tell us if we're worthy or beautiful or smart enough.
Right, exactly. And that makes setting boundaries even harder because it feels like we're risking that validation.
Totally. It's like we're giving our power away.
Like in those old fairy tales when they trade their voice for something they think they want.
Yeah. And then there's the fear of not being appreciated or valued or chosen even. Oof, those ones hit hard.
They do. No wonder it's hard to set boundaries with all that swirling around.
Totally. It's like this belief that if we don't please people, we'll be rejected or abandoned.
And so we end up always saying yes, even when we want to scream NO.
Oh, for sure. So TerKeurst lays out this whole like landscape of fear, but she doesn't just leave us there, thankfully.
Thank goodness.
She gives us these two reflection questions to help us, actually apply this to our lives. The first one asks, am I needing to be blank? And she uses the hero as an example.
But hero, okay.
Yeah, am I needing to be the hero to such an extent that I'm unwilling to establish and maintain a healthy boundary?
Ooh, that's a hard one to face.
Right. It makes you think, like, are we clinging to these unhealthy roles because we're scared?
Instead of setting boundaries from a place of self-respect.
Exactly. And then she goes on, do I fear that it will cost me too much?
Costs too much, huh?
She's saying, like, it could cost me being blank. She uses the example, admired, like, by this person.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the boundary isn't worth it. It's like we're so scared of what we might lose.
Even if what we're clinging to isn't even good for us.
Right. But what we don't realize is that by not setting boundaries, we're already losing something.
Like our sense of self, our well-being.
Yeah, our own inner compass.
It's a tough trade-off.
Okay, so then she gives us the second question. I need to be blank, sticking with that hero example.
Okay.
But I now recognize that sacrificing healthy boundaries to get blank. This time, she says, admiration from others is the wrong way to get my needs met.
I see. So it's like, it's okay to have the need, but
But we got to find a healthier way to get it met.
that's so important. Instead of twisting ourselves into pretzels to please others, we can start asking ourselves, what would it look like to honor my own needs in a way that's real and respectful?
Yes. And that's where those boundaries become so crucial.
For sure.
Okay, let's unpack this hero thing a little more. I think a lot of us relate to that, like needing to be the rescuer.
Oh, yeah. Always trying to fix everyone's problem.
Right. But what are the downsides of always playing that role?
Well, for starters, it can be exhausting.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it can actually be harmful to the other person, too. You know?
Huh, how so?
Well, if you're always rescuing them, they never learn to handle things on their own.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
And it can lead to these codependent relationships where, like, they become reliant on you to fix everything.
So it's actually not helpful in the long run.
Not really, no.
It's kind of like we're robbing them of the chance to grow and be more resilient. And it leaves the hero burnt out and resentful. Wow, I'm starting to see how even good intentions can backfire.
Yeah, it's not about demonizing helping people. It's about recognizing there's a difference between healthy support and rescuing.
And that line is often our boundaries.
Exactly.
So how do we break free from that hero complex? How do we start setting those healthy boundaries that let us be helpful but not like completely sacrifice ourselves?
Well, the first step is awareness. Recognizing those patterns and being honest about what's driving them.
So in the case of the hero, it's understanding that need for admiration, that feeling of being valuable.
Yes. And then looking for other, healthier ways to get those needs met.
Instead of fixing other people's problems, maybe we find a job where we get to solve problems or volunteer for a cause we care about.
Perfect examples. channeling that energy in a way that nourishes us instead of depleting us.
And that's where setting boundaries comes in, learning to say no, protecting our time and energy.
Exactly. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
You know what's tough, though? It often feels like the people closest to us are the ones who benefit the most from us not having boundaries.
Oh, that's so true. And that's why setting boundaries in those close relationships can be the hardest, but also the most rewarding.
It's about having those honest conversations,
Yeah.
right? Expressing our needs clearly, but with compassion.
Right. It's about saying, I love you, but I also need to take care of myself.
And when we can do that, it actually makes the relationship stronger in the long run.
Absolutely. It builds trust and respect.
This is all starting to connect for me now. We start with these fears, and it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be a lot.
But then we see how those fears are driving our behavior, and we can start to reframe our needs, look for healthier ways to get them met.
And that's where those boundaries come in.
It's like we're taking back our power little by little.
And as we do that, we can build relationships that are truly fulfilling, both for ourselves and the people we care about.
This has been incredibly helpful. We've covered so much. From those initial fears to this idea of reframing our needs and setting healthy boundaries. But before we move on, I want to talk about another important thing the chapter highlights: the connection between fear and people-pleasing. It feels like we're trying to earn love and acceptance instead of just believing we're worthy of it.
You hit the nail on the head, and that could lead to some pretty unhealthy patterns, especially in relationships.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, think about the classic drama triangle. You've got the persecutor, the one who's always criticizing and controlling.
Okay, yeah.
And there's the victim, who feels helpless and blames everyone else.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the rescuer, our hero, always swooping in, trying to fix everything, make everyone happy.
I can see how that ties back to the fears we were talking about. Like, if I'm terrified of not being liked, I might fall right into that rescuer role just to avoid conflict, get that approval.
Exactly. But the problem is, by constantly rescuing others, we're actually preventing them from taking responsibility for their own lives.
Oh, wow, I never thought of it that way.
And in the long run, the rescuer ends up feeling resentful and totally burnt out. It's just not sustainable.
So it's a lose-lose situation.
Pretty much.
Okay, so how do we break free from this triangle? It feels like a trap.
Awareness is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing when you're slipping into those roles and understanding what's driving you.
And then what? Boundaries.
Exactly.
But how do you tell someone, hey, I'm not going to rescue you anymore? That seems harsh.
It doesn't have to be. It's all about communicating your needs clearly and respectfully. Like, instead of instantly jumping in to solve their problem,
Yeah.
you could say, I hear you're going through a tough time, and I care about you. But I think it would be good for you to try handling this yourself first. I'm here to support you, but I'm not going to do it for you.
Wow, that's such a different approach. It's still supportive, but
But it sets a boundary.
yeah.
It shifts you out of the rescuer role into something more empowering, like a
Mhm.
guide or a cheerleader.
Mm.
You're still there for them, but
Mhm.
you're not enabling their dependence on you.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about creating healthier relationships.
Exactly. And TerKeurst makes a really important point about boundaries aren't selfish.
Oh, that's good to hear.
In fact, they're an act of self-love and self-respect.
Mm.
When you set boundaries, you're saying that your needs and well-being matter.
That's a big mindset shift for me. I've always felt so guilty about setting boundaries, like I'm letting people down or being selfish.
It's a common struggle, but think about it this way. When we're constantly giving too much and neglecting our own needs, we end up resentful and burnt out.
True.
And when we're running on empty, we can't truly show up for anyone.
So setting boundaries is actually a way to be more present in our relationship.
Exactly. It's about saying, I care about you, and I want to be there for you in a way that works for both of us.
I like that. Okay, so let's say I'm ready to start setting some boundaries. Where do I even begin?
We'll start by thinking about the areas where you feel the most drained or resentful. What are the situations where you're always saying yes when you really want to say no?
Oh, I can think of a few. Like always covering for people at work or lending money to that friend who never seems to get back on their feet.
Those are great examples. Now, try to envision what a healthy boundary would look like in those situations. Maybe it's saying no to extra projects at work or having a frank conversation with your friend about limits on the financial help you can offer.
Okay. It's starting to feel less scary now, like it doesn't have to be this huge dramatic thing.
Not at all.
It can just be small adjustments.
Exactly. And TerKeurst has some really helpful advice on how to communicate those boundaries. She talks about being clear and direct, but also respectful.
So it's not about blaming or attacking.
Nope. It's about calmly and assertively stating your needs and expectations.
This is bringing up that fear of not being liked again. What if setting a boundary does make someone upset? What if they reject me? It's a valid fear. And it's true that not everyone is going to react well to your boundaries.
Ooh, that's what I'm afraid of. I hate confrontation.
I hear you. But remember, you're not responsible for other people's reactions. You can control how you communicate, but you can't control how they choose to respond.
So even if they get upset, it doesn't mean I did something wrong.
Right. It's their reaction, not your fault.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
And sometimes setting a boundary means accepting that a relationship might change. It might mean some tough conversations, maybe even some distance. But in the end, it's about taking care of yourself and creating space for healthier connections.
It's like you were saying earlier about breaking free from the drama triangle.
Exactly.
Instead of being stuck in those unhealthy roles, we're taking control of our own needs and creating more balanced dynamics.
Exactly. It's about stepping out of the drama and stepping into a space of empowerment. I love that. Okay, this has been so eye-opening, but I have to admit it still feels a little daunting. Like, what if I mess it up? What if I set the wrong boundary or say it in a way that hurts someone's feelings?
It's totally natural to feel that way. Remember, setting boundaries is a process. It's something you learn and get better at over time.
So it's okay to start small and just try things out.
Exactly. And you can always adjust your boundaries as you go. What works in one situation might not work in another. And your needs and boundaries will change as you grow too.
You know, this is making me think about those two reflection questions from the chapter. Maybe it's not a one-time thing. Maybe it's something we should revisit regularly.
I love that idea.
Checking in with ourselves about those fears and needs and adjusting our boundaries as we go.
It's not about setting boundaries in stone. It's about having an ongoing conversation with yourself and with others about what feels healthy.
I love that. This has been so helpful. I'm honestly seeing boundaries in a whole new light now.
That's great to hear.
They're not about shutting people out. They're more like guidelines for creating better relationships.
Exactly.
And it's not selfish to set them. It's actually self-care and self-respect.
It is.
Before we wrap up this section, there's one more thing that really stuck with me from the chapter. TerKeurst talks about reframing our needs. It's not about pretending we don't have those needs or that they're not important. It's about finding healthier ways to get those needs met.
Exactly. It's so key. Like with that hero example, instead of saying, I need to be the hero, we can ask, okay, what is it about being the hero that I like so much?
Like, what need is that filling?
Right. Is it the sense of accomplishment? Feeling needed? Is it about getting admiration from other people?
And once we know what those deeper needs are,
Then we can start looking for healthier ways to meet them.
so instead of always trying to fix other people's problems,
Maybe we pour that energy into a creative project, or we volunteer, or maybe we just take some time for ourselves to recharge.
so it's not about denying the need, it's just finding a better way to express it.
Exactly.
And that's where boundaries come in.
They help us protect that time and energy so we can actually meet those needs in a healthy way.
Instead of constantly giving ourselves away.
Yes. Boundaries aren't about deprivation. They're about empowerment.
I like that.
They give us the freedom to choose how we use our time and energy so we can show up as our best selves in everything we do.
Our relationships, our work, our passions.
And most importantly, our relationship with ourselves.
It all comes back to that. Okay, so TerKeurst actually gives us an example of how to rewrite those reflection statements. Like, instead of saying, I need to be the hero to get admiration from others,
Right.
we can say, I need to feel valued and appreciated. And I can find healthy ways to get those needs met without sacrificing my own well-being.
Yes, much better.
It's a subtle change, but it's huge.
It really is. It's about taking ownership of your needs and finding ways to meet them that don't involve compromising your boundaries or needing other people's approval all the time.
It's so freeing when you think about it that way.
It is.
You know, something I'm realizing as we talk about all this is that setting boundaries isn't a one-time thing. It's a process. It's something we have to keep working on.
Oh, absolutely.
What might have been a healthy boundary a year ago might not work for me today.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And that's where self-awareness is so important.
Paying attention to how we feel.
Yes. Those feelings of resentment or exhaustion or frustration, those are big clues.
They're like red flags telling us to check our boundaries again.
Exactly. It's time to reassess.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me today is this. Setting boundaries isn't about being selfish or trying to control other people.
It's really not.
It's actually about being more compassionate towards ourselves and towards others.
I love that. Boundaries are about creating a safe space where we can be our true selves and connect with others from a place of wholeness, not from a place of depletion.
And that benefits everyone in the end.
100%.
This deep dive has been so insightful. We talked about all those fears that hold us back, that whole people-pleasing thing, the hero complex, and we learned about reframing our needs and the importance of setting healthy boundaries. What a journey.
I know, right?
And as we wrap up, I think it would be helpful to leave our listeners with something to think about.
What's that?
What's one small boundary you can set today to honor your own needs? It doesn't have to be anything major, just one small step in the right direction.
Ooh, I like that.
Maybe it's saying no to one extra thing. Maybe it's scheduling some time for yourself. Maybe it's finally having that honest conversation with someone about something that's been bothering you.
All great ideas.
Just remember, every step counts. You deserve to create a life that truly reflects your values and makes you happy.